No one leaves home unless home is the mouth of a shark. You only run for the border when you see the whole city running as well. Your neighbors running faster than you, breath bloody in their throats.
The boy you went to school with, who kissed you dizzy behind the old tin factory, is holding a gun bigger than his body. You only leave home when home won't let you stay.
No one leaves home unless home chases you. Fire under your feet, hot blood in your belly.
It's not something you ever thought of doing until the blade burned threats in your neck. And even then, you carried your national anthem under your breath, only tearing up your passport in the airport toilet, sobbing as each mouthful of paper made it clear you would not be going back.
You have to understand that no one puts their child in a boat unless the sea is safer than the land.
No one burns their palms under trains, beneath carriages.
No one spends days and nights in the stomach of a truck feeding on newspaper unless the miles traveled means something more than the journey.
No one crawls under fences. No one wants to be beaten. No one wants to be pitied.
No one chooses refugee camps or strip searches where your body is left aching.
Or prison, because prison is safer than a city on fire. And one prison guard in the night is safer than a truckload of men who look like your father.
No one could take it. No one could stomach it. No one's skin would be tough enough.
The go home, blacks!
Refugees, dirty immigrants,
Asylum seekers, caravans, sucking our country dry.
beggars smelling strange, sticking their hands into my space.
Savages who messed up their country and now they want to come and mess up ours. How do the words, the dirty looks, roll off your backs?
Maybe because the verbal blow is softer than a limb torn off.
Or the hateful words are more tender than 14 men waiting their turn. Or the insults are easier to swallow than rubble, than bone, than your child's body in pieces.
I want to go home. But home is the mouth of a shark. Home is the barrel of a gun.
And no one would leave home unless home chased you to the shore.
Unless home told you to quicken your legs, leave your clothes behind, crawl through the desert, wade through the oceans, drown, save, be hungry, beg. Forget pride. Your survival is more important.
No one leaves home until home is a sweaty voice in your ear saying, leave, 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 run away from me now. I don't know what I've become, but I know anywhere is safer than here.
I normally begin my sermons with a prayer that asks God to make the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts acceptable and pleasing in God's sight. It's a prayer I've said through the years just about every time I've ever preached, as much for me as for everyone else in the room. As much to remind me that sometimes the Word of God gets through because of the sermon. Other times it might get through in spite of the sermon. Gotta love those meditations of the heart. But today I'd like to offer a different prayer, one that might not be a bad one for us to include whenever we worship. Something like this. God of justice, this morning we are reflecting on your grace and love from the relative comfort of lives that so many others in this world will never, ever be able to enjoy. We know that this is not okay with you. And until that day when all of us know the safety of having a home, we ask you to forgive us our riches and prepare us for however it is you plan to make things right again. Amen. Isn't it true that the ongoing reality of our lives is that we have so much and others so little? And that can't be okay with the God of Abraham or the God of Jesus. Which means that when we finish the words of institution, as we do every week at the Lord's Supper, and imagine God's day of justice, we might want to be careful when we ask almost glibly for God's realm to come. Today, people of God, we are among the lucky and the privileged simply by virtue of having a home, while so many of our sisters and brothers are on the run. Imagine it. Imagine it maybe with the poet's help. Imagine having no home. Back when we were kids, maybe in elementary school, 4th or 5th grade, we would occasionally take a break from watching the Andy Griffith Show or Gilligan's Island or maybe the Monkey Show. And we would go outside and we would play tag. Tag. It's a game all kids play. We played like just about every other kid has ever played tag. Someone was it. It had to chase people until it caught someone else. And right in the center of the yard was home base, where we knew we were safe and we could not be tagged. The fleet of foot didn't have to really worry too much about home base and where it was. But those of us who were slower always had to have our eye on home. How far away were we from its safety? That calculus was critically important for people who weren't very fast. One of our buddies, Gary Binge, was one of the kids in our neighborhood, and he was bigger than most of the kids our age. He was a big kid, and he didn't run very fast. So Gary's way of playing tag was to stand only a foot off home base for the whole game. So that when anyone made a run at him, he would just move his right foot. And he'd be on home. Not fair, not fair, we would scream with all the indignation of a 10-year-old. And we were especially annoyed by the way he would grin as he moved that one foot to stand on home base. Just before someone would sneak up on him and almost get it. But one day we decided we had had enough and we made a rule change. One day we played tag just like always, but we took away home base. No home base. No place of safety. Gary Binge was not happy. But for a while, he was a trooper. He attempted to abide by the rules, but you can imagine what happened. Gary was a big kid. He was it all the time. He ran, and he raced, and he cussed, and he fumed, and he tried to cheat. He couldn't catch anybody. Gary was on the run until he just plain ran out of energy and he was done. I don't like tag anyway, he said as he walked back to his real home. Without home base, Gary simply couldn't play the game anymore. It was out of reach. It's hard to stay in the game when home base gets taken away. Especially when you don't have the kind of resources, the kind of skills that everyone else seems to have. So many of God's children around the world are on the run without a place to call home. Fueled by adrenaline for a while, desperation for a while, but eventually, getting more and more tired. What must that be like for God, who is the parent of us all, to see her little children, her pride and joy, her little babies on the run? The scripture Rick read for us today is the very last part of a very long story involving some of God's children who are on the run. Some of you all may remember the story of Joseph, made famous by Sir Andrew Lloyd Webber's musical Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. Those brothers of Joseph, who had seen better days, were now refugees, having been driven from their home in Judah by a terrible drought. They were on the run. They had no home base left to speak of, and they ran until they found themselves on the border of the great empire, Egypt. There they stood, seeking asylum. And wouldn't you know, the immigration officer in charge of their case was none other than their long-lost brother, Joseph. The one they had plotted to kill, and the one that they had left in a big hole, an unmarked grave. The one they left in the wilderness. But as the story tells us, Joseph survived that attack. Joseph found his way to Egypt. Joseph found asylum. Joseph found favor with Pharaoh through his ability to interpret dreams. And then Joseph rose to second in command, second only to Pharaoh himself. So there is Joseph, the mighty Joseph now, in all of his glory, holding all the cards, standing on the side of the border fence where everyone has a home, looking out at his caravan of brothers with all kinds of reasons to show them absolutely no kindness. In fact, to offer them only disdain. Joseph looks out and he sees that the refugees are his brothers. And what does he do? He weeps. He cries so loud everyone could hear him crying, and he dismissed them. His brothers, they were ready for the worst. They would take anything. They were ready to receive his brother's wrath. But as it turns out, Joseph was overcome by what he saw. He was bowled over by the sight of his brothers, who must have looked miserable because they'd been on the run. He was immediately ready to welcome them and give them a home. Go, says Joseph. Go and get our father still in that land of suffering. Bring him here so our family can once again be together. Together. Joseph's compassionate response to his refugee brothers gives us all a model of how we might respond to the presence of poverty and desperation at our borders. There is a crisis at our borders, I believe, but I'm not sure it's as much a national crisis as it is a personal one for those who are there and a moral one for those of us who are here. Seen from a distance, the crowds can look mean and menacing, but if we follow Joseph's lead and get ourselves close enough to recognize those who are on the run as our brothers and our sisters and our children. Our impulse as children of God, or maybe even our call as followers of Jesus, is to figure out a way to offer hope to those who are on the run. And maybe our call goes beyond that. Maybe the story of Joseph's forgiving response to his brothers who hadn't always been kind to him, maybe the story challenges us to act with compassion toward those who are closer to us, but still might feel that they are on the run, and offer them home too. In fact, maybe, just maybe, one way to be ambassadors for Jesus isn't the old-fashioned preachy way, but instead to look at the other as if they were in some way on the run and offer them home. It's what Joseph did when he welcomed his brothers. It's what Jesus did when he sat with the woman at the well and welcomed those who were thought of only as sinners. And it continues to be our opportunity to offer the home we have found in this community and in the grace of Jesus Christ to a world that is on the run. For too many, far too many, home base has been taken away. Everything in our Judeo-Christian story tells us to do whatever we can to bring it back into play.